Hey, welcome back. Thanks for tuning in. So today's episode is a little different from what I usually do. You see, it actually comes as a result of a request that I had on TikTok. So I wanted to honor the request. They asked for a part two. So that's what I'm going to do today. So this episode is about basically relating to people. And this may be work related, but it could also be used as far as relationships, personal relationships, family relationships. And so there'll be some examples here, and I'll use them so that you guys can look for this yourself. So basically, I'm going to use different placements to describe relationships, compatibility, maybe incompatibility, so that you can look at your own chart, look at the charts of the people who you know to determine whether you're compatible or not, or what problem areas you may have. I'm not going to make this very long. I'm only going to do a few things here. I'm not going to go into too much detail because I don't usually talk about synastry that much. But I'll just touch on a few things because this was something that had comments, so I wanted to respond. So just to start off, the first thing I'm going to talk about is I'm only going to talk about maybe three things here. The first one is I'm going to start with what prompted the TikTok comment in the first place. So I was doing a episode on Tina Turner. If you have not watched it after this video, I recommend watching it. So I talked about Tina Turner's relationships, especially her relationship with Ike Turner, which is pretty famous or infamous, if you will. And I mentioned that I mentioned that she had a lot of trouble with a specific type of men, and that's Scorpio men. And after doing some research, I noticed that she had Scorpio over her fourth house. So for those of you that aren't familiar with the fourth house or houses in general, we have 12 houses in our chart. All of us do. And the fourth house, well, all of the houses kind of have a correlation or an association with specific signs because there's 12 houses, there's 12 signs. So the fourth house tends to be associated with the fourth sign in the zodiac. If you haven't figured it out yet, that's the sign Cancer. So if you are a Cancer or you know someone who is a Cancer, take a second and think about their personality. What is it like? Or even if you don't know any, or even if you do and you are one, think about the traits that you have read, the descriptions about that sign. You probably heard that they can be very loving, they're very emotional, sensitive. You've probably heard that they love their family, they love kids. You probably heard that security is very important to them. That can be emotional security as well as financial security. Now, I will say I don't hear as much about the financial security, but let me tell you, I think that's it tends to be understated. I think that's pretty important to most Cancers, is the financial security component. And if they're not with someone that provides that, they will usually work pretty hard to provide that for themselves. So that's something to think about. But anywho, back to my point. So you have the fourth sign in the zodiac, Cancer, and it's associated with the house, fourth house. And so based on what we just described as Cancer, that kind of gives you an idea what the fourth house is about. It is about home and family. Home can be how you feel about your home, where you're from, your roots. It can also be your physical home, real estate, and of course, your family. It could be immediate family, your children, your spouse, or even mom and dad, you could say, like our parents, or maybe extended family. But in general, how you feel about those people. But the thing I really want to focus you on is the feelings that you have, like the emotional security. That's also a really, really important thing. So there's financial security, then there's emotional security. Those are really, really important things to Cancer, and that's part of the core of what the fourth house is about. And that's the reason why this is such, to me, a really important place to have someone else's plants. So the number one is, first one I'm going over, another person's planets in your fourth house. and the impact it can have on you. Now, in Tina Turner's example, the impact was not good because pretty much every Scorpio man that she dated, because Scorpio was a sign over a fourth house, she had a hard time with them. Ike wasn't the only one. So this is something that did not work out for her too well. And one day, I decided to go on a Facebook group that I belong to. I belong to several astrology Facebook groups. One of them, I asked the question if they felt like when people had planets that fell in their fourth house, that they had a difficult time with them, that they have a hard time either getting along with them, or if they were in a relationship with them, that the relationship goes sour. Just kind of get a pulse there of if they had difficulties with people of this sign. I would say maybe somewhere between 40 to 50% of the people said that they did actually have a hard time with people who had planets in their fourth house. I don't think it starts out that way, but because the fourth house rules your emotional security or stability, or maybe insecurity or instability, if someone has planets in your fourth house and they don't mean you well, you're going to hurt pretty bad behind it, because this is like one of the most sensitive places in your chart. And to have someone come there to your house and wreak havoc, basically, you're going to have a hard time getting over it. In Tina's situation, in the midst of her marriage to Ike, she actually tried to commit suicide several times, or tried to, unalive herself several times. And it's difficult to deal with someone who would treat you so poorly, but also it's not as easy to get over when that person has planets in your fourth house. So it is something to think about. Now, on the flip side, there were some people in that Facebook group that I was polling, so they didn't have any issues at all. And that can happen too. As a matter of fact, I do know of, I've seen some couples who, one of them had planets in the other person's fourth house, and they've been married for over 20 years. So it's very possible that you can meet someone who has planets in your fourth house and everything turns out just fine. And you guys, are able to form a meaningful relationship. But I would imagine that's a situation where you're not dealing with someone that means you harm. You're dealing with someone who means you good and is trying to nest with you, build a home with you, build a family with you. So if that's the case, then it will probably be, a lot different. You won't have as many issues as someone, say, as Tina Turner, who it didn't work out so great for her. So this is your emotional core, your security. It also represents your social values, the fourth house, such as kindness, resilience, positivity, which I think is why it's so hard to deal with if you run into someone who has planets in your fourth house and they don't mean you well, because it's kind of hard to stay positive if someone's treating you that bad. So that's pretty much it for the fourth house. That's all I want to go over. And of course, feel free to leave a comment for me about the fourth house, your experiences. If you know your chart, have you ever dated someone, married someone, or have a family member who has a planet in your fourth house? What is your experience like? Do you feel safe with that person? Or is this someone that you had to get away from because you felt like they were doing you too much emotional damage? Okay, so on to the second one, the second of three. A person's planets in your eighth house, So using the same analogy, all houses are usually associated with the signs that are the same number. So eighth house associated with a sign, the eighth sign in the zodiac, and that would be, of course, Scorpio. So I know we just talked about Scorpio a little bit, but not that much. So if you take a similar approach, like with Scorpio, if you know one, if you've read about them, most people have, It's a pretty popular sign, I would think. Um, what are you used to hearing about them? I can name off a few things: that they're intense people, which is sometimes true on the outside. Some of them I think keep it more so on the inside. Passionate people, whatever they believe in, they usually really believe in. I find them to be very competitive people, which is something people don't talk about a whole lot when it comes to Scorpio, but they can be quite competitive. There's a lot said about their sexuality, which is another topic altogether and may or may not be as much of an issue or the way people think it is. Again, that's a whole nother topic. But also very deep. They like to research or know things on a deep level. Things like that. So based on those descriptions of a Scorpio, what do you think the eighth house is about? If you don't already know, some of you who are watching this may already know. Eighth house represents things like intense experiences, crises, transition, death. It doesn't have to necessarily be physical. It could just be the conclusion of something. Emotions, compulsions, yes, sexuality falls in there. So those are all things that represent really intimate things, intense emotions, intense experiences, major changes in a person's life. A lot of times when I'm timing things, if I see eighth house, especially solar return eighth house over a specific house in a person's birth chart, like over that, if I tend to lay it over the one chart over the other, if I see the eighth house over a house and there's planet there and the planet is forming a conjunction, usually that's a sign to me that there's some part of their life that's going to undergo some major change. Maybe even a reform, because eighth house does also have to do with reform, totally reforming and changing something. So the reason why this is impactful is if you think about it, not even that hard to have someone's planets there, especially personal planets. They tend to be quite impactful. Some people have had long marriages with people who've had planets in their eighth house. So I read this and I am inclined to agree. Okay. So people who have planets in their chart in Scorpio, people who have planets in their chart in the eighth house, natally, in their birth chart, people who maybe have their Pluto like in a tight aspect to a personal planet like Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, they are probably more likely to be comfortable with someone who has planets in their eighth house. However, if you have a person who doesn't have planets in Scorpio, doesn't have any planets in their eighth house, and they don't really have any aspects between Pluto or any of the other planets in their chart, they're probably going to be very uncomfortable with the whole dynamic between a person who has their planets in their eighth house. Either way, whether it's you with your planets in the person's eighth house, or it's the other person's planets in your eighth house. Either way, if you don't have any like basically Scorpio energy in your chart, like significant in a significant way that makes it stand out or shapes your personality or your values, you may struggle with this type of placement. Generally it's that people will like run in the other direction if they don't have any like real Scorpio influence in their chart, if this happens. Whereas there are some people who, let's say, have planets in their eighth house, they're going to run towards a person who has planets in their eighth house. They're really comfortable with that level of intensity, emotional, romantic, sexual, all of that type of intensity. They're really comfortable with that. And so that's why you might see a person who has that in their chart be really happy and okay and feel like that's the way the relationship should be. It's supposed to be this level of intensity. It's not a real relationship if you don't have that. So you may run into that. I think a really, really good example of this is actually the singer Gwen Stefani. Some of you, I would think most of you are probably familiar with her. Even if you don't remember her name right offhand, you probably heard some of her songs, whether as a solo artist or when she was with the group No Doubt. So if you don't know that much about her, when she was with the group No Doubt, she used to date one of the band members. His name was Tony. And she's talked a little bit in the media about their relationship. For those that followed the group, you know that they were together, and then they had a big breakup, and that was the inspiration for some of her songs, like Don't Speak and stuff like that. Like, there's really about her heartbreak of that relationship ending, because she said she really felt like, this was the person for her. To quote her exactly, in an interview, she said, "I was so in love and obsessed with Tony, and he knows that. As soon as he opened the car door, I was like, I love him." Now, this was what Gwen said about Tony when she met him. She said, I was so in love and I was obsessed. Another word that's associated with Scorpio, by the way. Maybe not the most positive word, but another word associated with that. And therefore, it has some connection with the eighth house. So where am I going with this? Tony had at least, I want to say, 2 planets in her eighth house, which led to her kind of feeling this way. Like, this is the person, I have to have them. This is, she said one time she was thinking, please, God, please let me have his children. And she was really, really into him. She didn't want to do everything with him, have him help her with her homework, everything. She was so into him. So yes, when it ended, I guess it shouldn't be surprising that it led to a lot of writing for her, for the No Doubt albums, but it was one of their biggest hits. So it worked out for her professionally, artistically, financially, but of course, who wants that type of heartbreak? Well, she was comfortable with that, and that made sense for her. Another person might have run in the other direction, but that just goes to show you what it's like when a person has planets in your eighth house. You may feel like you're super in love. You may feel like they can see through you. You may feel like uh, uh, nobody understands you the way that they do. You may feel extremely physically attracted to them, like you can't get enough of being around them. And yes, you may be a bit obsessed with them, or vice versa. There's this big debate online about who feels this most. Is it the house person or the planet person? Some people say both, and some people say just the house person. I think it kind of depends on what else is going on in the two people's charts, but I would say definitely in this situation, you can see the house person was affected. And even in the situation previously with planets in the 4th house with Tina, she was the house person and she was affected. So I don't think you can say that the house person is not affected. It's just the planet person. Definitely the house person that is affected. I don't know if it's the most or it just depends on the people, but definitely the house person is affected. Okay, so last but not least in this video, the third one, person's planet in feminine houses. Another way of putting this is subjective houses. So the houses are broken up in different ways. They have earth houses, water houses, fire houses, air houses. Basically a play on, as I mentioned, the association with the signs to the houses. And with, let's say, Cancer and Scorpio being water signs, 4th and 8th are considered water houses, right? And so those are considered the more subjective houses, basically meaning anytime a person has a planet that falls in either an earth or water house, you're going to feel those more so. It's going to be more, you're going to be more subjective, more affected by it than if they have a planet that falls in one of your air or fire houses. Examples of air house, 3rd house, the 11th house, fire houses, 5th house, or 9th house. You're not going to be as affected by those personally, because those are more, I guess you could say, outgoing, social, sometimes intellectual, sometimes just, going out and doing things. And so you're not as much, you don't take things as personally in those houses when people have planets there than you would if it was in like one of your water houses. But to give you a good example here, we mentioned earlier, 8th house can represent intensity and romance and physical attraction and all that stuff. Well, the physical attraction aspect can also happen in the 5th house, which is a fire house because it's associated with the sign Leo. But in the 5th house, it's more about fun, going out, painting the town red, maybe traveling, participating in hobbies and sports and whatever shows. It's about having fun more so. Whereas with the 8th house, did Gwen sound like it was just about fun for her? No, it didn't. And so with the 5th house, it is probably more about fun than anything else. And for that reason, it may or may not be a long relationship. There may not be much longevity to the relationship at all. At least if you're dating. If this is like a family member, it may mean that you have a lot of fun with your family member going out and doing things together. And that's part of your bond, I guess you could say. But for these subjective houses or water houses, these are the type of relationships you're going to be really invested in because you'll take them a lot more personally. So in the interest of not going too long with it, I hope this was helpful. Please feel free to let me know if you have any questions or comments about what I mentioned and what your experiences are with these. I love to read other people's experiences because I feel like this has taught me a lot in hearing other people's experiences with these particular placements. So until next time, see you later.